Imagine this. You're driving home late at night. The road is quiet. Your music is playing softly. Everything feels normal. Then, in a fraction of a second, headlights. A truck. It's sliding out of control straight toward you. You don't have time to react. No time to think. No time to pray. Impact should be unavoidable. You should be dead. But somehow, you survive. Barely. Lucky? Maybe. Or maybe something far stranger happened. Maybe in one version of reality, you died. And in another, you lived. And the only reason you are watching this video right now is because your consciousness continued in the version where you survived. What if you have already died? Not once, not twice, but countless times. And every single time reality split, you only experienced the branch where you stayed alive. This sounds absurd. Maybe even insane. But it leads to one of the strangest and most disturbing ideas in modern physics and philosophy. Quantum immortality. And if this idea is even partially true, death may not be something you will ever experience. We all know one thing about life. Eventually, we die. That feels obvious, certain, unavoidable. Every human who has ever lived has died, or will die. So death feels like the most universal experience imaginable. But there's a strange problem with that statement. Death may be universal, but nobody has ever actually experienced being dead. Think about that. You can experience fear. You can experience pain. You can experience almost dying. You can lose consciousness. You can black out. But the actual moment of death, you never truly experience it. Because experience requires something very important. An observer. A conscious point of view. The moment consciousness completely disappears, there is no one left to observe anything. Which creates a weird philosophical puzzle. Can you ever experience your own non-existence? Or does your subjective experience simply never include death? At first, this sounds like wordplay. But quantum physics takes this idea into truly terrifying territory. To understand why, we need to talk about something deeply weird. Quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales of reality, atoms, electrons, particles, the universe stops behaving like common sense. Particles can exist in multiple states at once. An electron can be here and there. A particle can spin up and down simultaneously. This is called superposition. And yes, it sounds ridiculous. Even physicists found it disturbing. One famous thought experiment captured this weirdness perfectly. Schrödinger's cat. Imagine a cat sealed inside a box. Inside the box is a quantum mechanism with a 50% chance of triggering poison. According to quantum mechanics, until the system is observed, the trigger exists in superposition. Triggered and not triggered. Which means the cat is, mathematically speaking, both alive and dead. Only when someone opens the box does reality seem to choose. Alive or dead. For decades, physicists argued about what this means. Does observation collapse reality into one outcome, or is something even stranger happening? In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett proposed a radical idea. What if the wave function never collapses? What if both outcomes happen? Not one, both. In Everett's many worlds interpretation, reality splits. Every quantum possibility becomes real. Every possible outcome happens, just in different branches of the universe. Flip a coin. Heads appears in one universe. Tails appears in another. Both outcomes exist. Reality branches constantly, not occasionally, constantly. Every quantum event creates more branches, an unimaginably large tree of realities. If this sounds like science fiction, it gets stranger, because now we bring consciousness into the equation, and that's where things become disturbing. Imagine a machine. This machine measures a quantum event with a 50% outcome. If the result is A, nothing happens. If the result is B, the machine instantly kills you. Every time the machine runs, quantum mechanics creates two branches. In one branch you survive. In the other, you die. Now let's think carefully. From an outside observer's perspective, this is simple. Half the time you die, half the time you live. Run the machine enough times, your chance of survival becomes tiny, almost zero. But from your perspective, something strange happens. You can never experience the branch where you died, because dead branches contain no observer, no consciousness, no experience. So from first-person experience, you only ever remain aware in branches where you survive. Again, and again, and again. This thought experiment is called quantum suicide, and its unsettling implication is quantum immortality. The idea is terrifyingly simple. If consciousness can only continue in branches where it survives, then subjectively, you may never experience death. Ever. Read that again. You may never experience death. Now the horror begins. Because immortality sounds amazing, until you think deeper. Quantum immortality doesn't mean eternal youth. It doesn't mean perfect health. It doesn't mean you stay 25 forever. It only means your consciousness continues in branches where you do not die. That's very different. Imagine you develop a deadly disease. In most branches, the disease kills you, but in extremely rare branches, treatment works. Doctors are shocked. You survive. Then later a severe accident. Most branches end in death, but one improbable branch remains. You survive. Again, and again, and again. As time passes, the branches where you remain alive become increasingly improbable, more bizarre, more statistically impossible. You become an anomaly, a miracle, a walking statistical impossibility. At 90, people call you lucky. People call you extraordinary. At 180, people stop understanding. At 300, what would your life even look like? Would your body still function? Would survival mean endless suffering? Could consciousness continue inside a broken body? This is where quantum immortality becomes less comforting and more horrifying. Because maybe immortality isn't eternal life. Maybe it's eternal survival. Those are not the same thing. One sounds beautiful, the other sounds terrifying. But there's a serious problem. If quantum immortality were true, where are the 500-year-old humans? Why don't we see immortal people? There are several possible answers. The first is simple. The theory is wrong. Many physicists reject the interpretation entirely. Quantum immortality is highly speculative. There is no experimental proof. No evidence that consciousness behaves this way. Second, even if many worlds is correct, consciousness may not follow surviving branches in the way people imagine. Maybe awareness doesn't work like that. Maybe personal identity breaks. Maybe you don't continue. And then there's the third possibility. The unsettling one. What if you are already living in an improbable branch without realizing it? Think about your life. Close calls, near accidents, moments where things could have gone very differently, the car that almost hit you, the illness that could have been worse, the random event that somehow missed you. You call them lucky escapes, coincidences, fortune. But what if, from another perspective, those weren't close calls at all? What if those were moments where many versions of you ended, and only this version continued? You would never know, because every version that died cannot tell the story. Only survivors remain. Only survivors ask questions. Only survivors wonder. Here's what makes this idea so disturbing. It cannot be disproven from first-person experience. If quantum immortality is false, one day you die. End of story. No observation, no contradiction. If quantum immortality is true, you keep experiencing survival. Again and again. From your own perspective, both possibilities feel identical, until death would have happened. And that's the terrifying part. You can't test it. You can't verify it. You can only live forward, wondering. But maybe this theory matters for a different reason. Not because it's true, but because it changes how we think about consciousness. Physics explains particles, energy, matter, space, time. But consciousness remains deeply mysterious. Why does subjective experience exist at all? Why is there something it feels like to be you? Science still doesn't have a complete answer. And quantum immortality forces us to confront a terrifying possibility. Maybe consciousness is stranger than physics itself. Maybe reality is not just about what exists. Maybe it's also about what can be experienced. And those are not always the same thing. So, have you already died? Maybe not. Maybe quantum immortality is nonsense. Maybe this entire idea is just a philosophical curiosity. Or maybe, reality has faced the question many times before. Life or death? And every single time, your consciousness continued down the branch where you survived, again and again and again. Which leaves one final question. If death is not something you experience, if death only happens to the versions of you that stop observing, then how many times has reality already chosen against you? And how many times did you never notice? Maybe death isn't something that happens to you. Maybe death is something that only happens to everyone else. And if that's true, that somewhere in countless other universes, this video ended very differently, but you're still here, watching, listening, alive.